The necklace was small, cheap metal, worn and darkened by time. But when Augusto Montero saw it hanging around the boy's neck, his heart simply stopped. He froze in place, the cold Monday morning air pressing against him. Around him, the distant rumble of cars and the muffled echo of the underground parking garage filled the silence. The same one, not similar, not a copy, the same necklace. The boy lay curled up on a piece of cardboard, sleeping. He held an old torn backpack against his chest, and right over his heart he wore the exact same necklace Augusto's mother had given him at 8 years old. The one that should have been locked away in the wooden memory box he buried decades ago, along with everything he tried to erase from his past. Augusto's breath caught. His right hand trembled as he reached toward the small piece of metal like he was touching a ghost. Memory struck him all at once. The smell of burnt bread in his childhood kitchen, his mother's tired voice whispering, "Never lose this, my son," and the day she vanished from his life without a word. He blinked hard, trying to push the memories away, but the necklace shimmered beneath the fluorescent lights, undeniably real. The boy slowly opened his eyes, startled, and that was when everything got worse. "Mister, the lady who gave me this said that one day you would recognize it," the child whispered, voice soft, fragile, trained not to disturb anyone. Augusto swallowed hard. "What lady, kid? What did she look like?" The boy's answer fell like quiet thunder. "She looked like you, but she cried a lot." In that moment, the world of Augusto Montero, millionaire businessman, a man who built his life on silence and forgetting, began to crumble. He struggled to keep control as a single question echoed inside him, heavier than any contract or award he had ever earned. How could a poor, unknown child possess something only his mother should have touched? Before we begin, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Before Augusto Montero became a man accustomed to polished marble floors and boardrooms of glass, he belonged to a very different world, one made of cracked sidewalks, dusty front yards, and the distant hum of radios playing old songs through open windows. He grew up in a small neighborhood on the outskirts of a Brazilian town in the late 1970s. Back then, life moved slowly, like an old film reel spinning in a quiet theater. Children played football barefoot on uneven streets. Neighbors shouted greetings from porch to porch, and every house smelled of something familiar: fresh bread, wood smoke, or coffee boiling on a small aluminum stove. There were no cell phones, no screens glowing late into the night. Only the television, a boxy wooden thing with rounded corners, and even that flickered with static whenever the wind blew too hard. People talked more, argued more, laughed louder. Problems were heavy, but shared. Joys were simple, but real. Augusto remembered the evenings most. His mother would sit by the window, sewing under the warm glow of a single lamp. The soft rhythm of the needle, the smell of rain on the dirt road outside, and the comforting weight of her presence created a kind of peace he never felt again as an adult. Life was modest, sometimes painfully so, but held together by a quiet strength that came from love rather than money. He remembered the markets full of shouting vendors, the clatter of bicycles, the faded posters on brick walls advertising neighborhood dances and church events. It was a world where everyone knew everyone, and where secrets, once born, rarely stayed buried for long. Yet even in that simple world, one mystery lingered like a shadow behind childhood memories: his mother's disappearance. No explanations, no letters, just the sudden emptiness she left behind. And now, decades later, a boy with nothing but a torn backpack and a familiar necklace was about to reopen wounds he spent a lifetime trying to forget. Augusto Montero's childhood was not built on comfort nor on abundance. It was shaped by the kind of poverty that didn't always show in empty plates, but in the quiet sacrifices that adults made when they thought children weren't watching. And Augusto watched everything. In the late 70s, in that small, sun-bleached neighborhood, he was known as the quiet boy who spent more time observing the world than speaking to it. While other children kicked balls down the street until dusk, Augusto would sit on the wooden steps of his tiny house, legs dusty, elbows on his knees, and stare at the horizon as if trying to decode the secrets adults whispered behind closed doors. His mother, Helena, was the center of that little world. A thin woman with strong hands and soft eyes, she carried the weight of their lives with a kind of silent pride. She worked long hours, washing clothes for wealthier families, her fingers raw, the skin cracked from soap and cold water. Yet she always returned home with a smile, small, tired, but real. It was she who noticed that Augusto had a sharp mind, far sharper than anyone else his age in the neighborhood. He learned quickly, remembered everything, asked questions that teachers weren't prepared to answer. She encouraged him to read, collecting old newspapers and magazines from the houses she cleaned. Sometimes, when fortune smiled, she found discarded school books, torn, scribbled on, but still good enough for a curious boy. One night stood out in Augusto's memory, a night that lived in him like a photograph that time could never fade. Rain hammered the tin roof with angry fists. The electricity had gone out hours earlier, and the entire neighborhood was swallowed by darkness. His mother lit a small candle on the table, the flame trembling like a fragile heartbeat. She sat beside him, the faint orange glow softening her tired features, and she placed a necklace in his hands. A simple chain, a small circular pendant, cheap metal, nothing that anyone else would consider valuable, but Helena held it as if it were made of gold. "Augusto," she whispered, brushing his hair back gently, "you must never lose this. It belonged to my mother, and now it belongs to you." He frowned, puzzled. "Why give it to me now?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Because you're growing fast, faster than I expected, and one day you'll need something to remind you of where you came from." He didn't understand then, and she didn't explain. Her secrets were like the cracks in the walls of their home, visible but never fully revealed. But the memory didn't end there. Just as she stood to blow out the candle, she paused, her expression tightening. Her voice dropped to a tone he had never heard before, one that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "If anything happens to me, Augusto, you keep this necklace safe. Promise me." Fear filled his chest like cold water. Nothing's going to happen. Promise me," she repeated. He hesitated, then nodded. "I promise." She kissed his forehead, blew out the candle, and the night swallowed the rest of her words. In the years that followed, poverty deepened. Work became scarce. Arguments with distant relatives became more frequent. Augusto remembered waking up to muffled shouting some nights, his mother crying quietly into her apron the next morning, pretending nothing was wrong. There were days he went to school without lunch, days when he came home to find his mother exhausted on the floor, too tired to stand. But through everything, she still encouraged him, pushing him to study, to dream beyond the limits of their life. Then came the morning that would carve itself into his soul forever. He woke early, sunlight filtering through the thin curtains. The remnants of last night's rain clung to the window. The house was silent, too silent. His mother was gone. No note, no explanation, no sign of struggle, just gone. Neighbors whispered about exhaustion, about a woman pushed to her limits. Some spoke of despair, others speculated about a secret past, but none of them knew the truth. Augusto searched for her everywhere, schools, markets, old neighbors, bus stations. He walked the town until his feet bled, but the trail ended before it even began. The only thing she left behind was a single box under her bed, empty, except for a faint indentation where the necklace used to rest. The necklace that now hung around the neck of a boy he had never seen before. In the aftermath of her disappearance, relatives took him in reluctantly. He learned the harshness of charity, the humiliation of depending on people who reminded him constantly of the burden he represented. He faced mockery, pity, and that cold indifference adults reserve for children whose tragedies are inconvenient. That was the first break in his life, the first wound, the first lesson. The world does not stop for the lost, but inside him, the promise to his mother remained, a promise he eventually betrayed, burying the necklace in a dusty box, closing the lid, and vowing never to reopen that chapter until today, until the boy with the torn backpack, until the impossible resurfaced. The past he had spent a lifetime running from was standing right in front of him, wearing the very symbol he had sworn to protect. The year Elias turned 16, the quiet safety of his childhood began to shift, slowly at first, like a door left half open, letting in a draft of cold air he didn't yet understand. Until then, his world had been the The old neighborhood, the cracked sidewalks, the dusty football field behind the abandoned warehouse, and that narrow street where kids played until the lamps buzzed to life. But life has a subtle way of warning us before it changes completely. And for Elias, the warning came in the form of a rejection letter. It arrived folded in two, slipped under the peeling front door while he was outside helping Mrs. Ruth carry fresh groceries up the alley steps. When he opened it, hands slightly trembling, the words hit him harder than he expected. "We regret to inform you." He had applied for a scholarship at the private school downtown, the one with marble steps, polished floors, and students who arrived in shiny cars. He knew it was a long shot. Still, he hoped. Evelyn had told him that hope was an expensive thing in the world, but she also told him it was the only thing they could afford, without fear. But now, holding that letter, Elias felt something collapse inside him. Not loud, not dramatic, but quiet and permanent. That night, Evelyn found him sitting on the front steps, staring at the cracked pavement as if the answer were written somewhere between the fractures. "You're not defined by a no, son," she said gently, taking the letter from his hand. "Some roads aren't closed, they're just longer." Elias nodded, but the pain didn't leave. Their neighborhood wasn't cruel, but it was honest. Everyone knew who was likely to escape and who wasn't, and most believed Elias would stay. That weighed on him like a stone tied to a boy who wanted to learn how to swim. Weeks passed, and life resumed its rhythm, though Elias walked through it with a heaviness that didn't belong to someone his age. Then came the moment, the symbolic break, something he would remember for the rest of his life. It was a winter morning, the kind where breath clouds the air and the sky looks colorless. A wealthy businessman from across town had donated new coats to the neighborhood kids. They were handed out in the community center one by one. The line was long, full of small hands and hopeful eyes. Elias hadn't planned to take one. He had an old coat, threadbare but serviceable. He only went because Evelyn insisted he help carry bags for the younger ones. As he stood near the entrance, he overheard two volunteers whispering behind a stack of boxes. "That boy, Evelyn's kid, he applied to that big school, didn't he?" "Yeah, I heard. Poor thing. Some people just need to understand their place." Their place. The words cut deeper than the rejection letter ever had. He felt something inside him tighten, coil, burn. For the first time, he understood that the world didn't just challenge people like him with poverty. It challenged them with expectation, with invisible fences, with ceilings no one talked about but everyone saw. He stepped outside into the cold air, needing space. That's when he saw it. A girl, no more than 8, without a coat, shivering at the corner of the building. Her mother was arguing quietly with a volunteer, insisting someone must have miscounted the donations. The volunteer shook her head with that pitying look Elias had begun to hate. Without thinking, he removed his coat, the only one he had, and walked toward the girl. "You can take mine," he said softly. The girl looked up at him, hesitant. "But you'll be cold," she whispered. Elias smiled, though his lips trembled in the wind. "I'll be fine." He placed the coat over her shoulders. It was too big, swallowing her tiny frame, but she hugged it like something sacred. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "God bless you," she whispered. Elias didn't respond. He only nodded and walked away, the cold wrapping around him like a warning, but also like a strange kind of clarity. That moment, the moment he gave away the little he had, became the invisible line between the boy he had been and the young man he would become. Not because he wanted to be noble, not because he wanted to be seen, but because something inside him refused to accept the world as it was. And somewhere in that cold morning air, a seed was planted, a seed that would grow into the break that would later change his life, and the life of the child who would one day call him father, though they shared no blood. On the inside heel, barely visible, was the number 04 written in blue ink. He didn't know what it meant. Next, he held the photograph. Evelyn's smile in the picture was tired, not joyful, the kind of smile someone wears when the world is heavy, but the child in her arms was light. The child, dark-haired, tiny, wrapped in a faded blanket, was unmistakably not him. His pulse quickened. The birth certificate confirmed it. A name he didn't recognize, a child he never knew existed. twisted. His hands shook as he reached for the final item, the letter. The envelope was addressed simply, "For Elias. Open only when you are ready." He hesitated. Every instinct in him wanted answers, but a deeper part, one that had learned the cost of truth, feared what was coming. Still, he broke the seal. Evelyn's handwriting was shaky, but familiar. He read the first lines aloud, barely above a whisper. "My son, there are things I never told you, things I kept buried because I loved you too much to let them break you. But you were not my only child, and you were not the first." Elias's breath hitched. The letter went on. "Life took something from me before it gave me you. And the child in the picture, the one whose shoes you now hold, he is the reason I always looked at you with both joy and fear, because I knew that life could take you too." Tears blurred the ink. Elias closed the letter, pressing it against his chest, as if trying to absorb it through skin and pain. Those objects, simple, ordinary things, had become mirrors reflecting a truth he had never imagined. And suddenly, every unanswered question from his childhood took on a new shape. Every long silence, every night he found his mother wiping her eyes in the kitchen, every unexplained fear she carried when he walked out the door, a lost child, a hidden story, a past that wasn't finished with him. And though he didn't yet know it, those very objects would eventually lead him to the child who would grow up to stand at the center of his life. The child who would call him father, though blood said otherwise. Elias barely slept that night. The attic room felt smaller than usual, as if the walls themselves were closing in, pressing the weight of the truth he had uncovered directly against his ribs. The wooden chest sat in the corner like a silent witness, old, patient, and unwilling to offer any answers he hadn't yet earned. When morning finally filtered through the dusty skylight, Elias rose with the same heaviness still clinging to his bones. The photograph lay on the bedside table, the baby, the unfamiliar child wrapped in Evelyn's arms, the smile that didn't reach her eyes. With trembling hands, he turned the photo over. On the back, written in faded pencil, were three things. Samuel, 4 months old, May 12th. Forgive me. The handwriting was unmistakably Evelyn's. Samuel. The name felt foreign on Elias's tongue, yet somehow familiar in the softest, strangest way, like a melody he had heard once as a child, but forgotten. He needed answers, so he went to the only person old enough, patient enough, and honest enough to help him search, Mr. Dorian. The old pawnshop owner was already awake, polishing a rusted pocket watch behind the counter when Elias came downstairs. "You look haunted," Mr. Dorian said without looking up. "I found something," Elias whispered, "in that chest. Something about my mother." The old man lifted his eyes slowly, the metal polished cloth stilling in his hands. "Bring it here," he said softly. Elias placed the photograph and the tiny shoes on the counter. Mr. Dorian examined them with a seriousness Elias rarely saw in him. "This," the old man murmured, tapping the photo, "is the look of a woman carrying a secret too heavy for her heart." His gaze slid to the shoes. "And these were loved, worn by a child who ran, jumped, lived. Who was he?" Elias whispered. "Why didn't she ever tell me?" Mr. Dorian sighed, a long, tired sound. "Sometimes parents hide truth not to deceive, but to protect," he said. "Painfully so." He paused, then nodded toward a leather-bound box behind the counter. "I have something that might help you." From the box, he pulled out an old photograph album, covered in dust. "I didn't know if it belonged to you," he said, "but it was found with the wooden chest. I kept it safe." Elias swallowed hard. He opened the album. The first page showed a young Evelyn, before life's storms, before exhaustion carved lines into her face. She stood in front of a rundown apartment building, holding a small child, the same child, Samuel. Picture after picture revealed moments frozen in time. Evelyn feeding him in a kitchen lit by a single bulb. Evelyn holding his hands as he learned to walk. Evelyn looking at the child with a mixture of fierce love and terror, as if she feared the world might take him away at any moment. And then the photographs changed. There were fewer of them. The light dimmed in Evelyn's eyes. Samuel looked thinner, frailer, and then suddenly no more photos of Samuel at all, just blank pages. Elias's heartbeat turned into a slow, painful drum in his chest. "What happened to him?" he said, voice cracking. nothing. Mr. Dorian hesitated. "You should read the letter again," the old man whispered. "There may be more hidden between the lines than you realized." Elias returned to his attic room and sat cross-legged on the floor. He unfolded the letter again and read slowly, this time not as a son desperate for comfort, but as a man searching for truth. Halfway down, he noticed something he had overlooked, a faint indentation on the paper, as if Evelyn had pressed her pen too hard before stopping herself. He tilted the paper toward the light. The indentation formed a single word, taken. Cold washed through him. He returned to the chest and rummaged through its contents again. At the bottom, beneath the thin lining, he found something taped to the wood, something so small he had almost missed it, a hospital bracelet, his mother's name, Evelyn Marlowe. But below her name, in tiny printed letters, was the word that made Elias's stomach drop. Infant Samuel Marlowe, status temporary placement, temporary placement. His breath came unevenly. He whispered the words again, burning them into the air. Temporary placement, not adoption, not death, not lost, taken. Someone took his mother's first child, and she had spent the rest of her life grieving in silence. A tremor ran down Elias's hands as he held the bracelet. He pressed his forehead into his palms, tears burning behind his eyes, not just for Samuel, but for the woman who had carried that suffering alone. He had to know the truth. Every piece of his life suddenly felt like pages torn from a book he had never been allowed to read. He stood, grabbed the chest and placed it on the table with new determination. If Samuel existed, if he had been taken, then someone, somewhere, would have records. And if he was still alive, Elias felt a shock of dread and hope intertwined in his chest. Was Samuel out there right now, older than him, younger, broken, whole, alive? Something deep within Elias whispered that this mystery hadn't resurfaced by accident. The objects in the chest weren't simply memories. They were a roadmap, a path Evelyn had left for him, a truth she wanted him to find only when he was strong enough to face it. And now he was. He gathered the shoes, the photograph, the hospital bracelet, and the letter. He slipped them into a satchel, the fabric stretching around their shape like they were pieces of a fragile soul. As he headed for the door, he stopped for a moment. The attic room was small, quiet, familiar, but he knew he might never see this place the same way again. Because this wasn't just a search for a lost child anymore. It was a search for the missing piece of himself. "Samuel," he whispered into the empty room, as if the name could cross years and distance. "I'm coming." The city felt different that morning, colder, heavier, as if the clouds themselves sensed the truth Elias was inching toward. He walked with the satchel pressed tightly against his side, each step echoing with the weight of 28 years of unanswered questions. He didn't go to work. He didn't call anyone. Instead, he headed toward the only place that could hold the kind of truth his mother kept locked away, St. Alden's Hospital, a place he had passed hundreds of times but never entered, a place his mother had avoided her entire life. The sliding glass doors opened with a soft hiss, releasing the scent of antiseptic and polished floors. Elias moved straight to the reception desk. "My name is Elias Marlowe," he said, voice steady, even though he felt anything but. "I'm looking for medical records from the year I was born." His throat tightened. "And earlier." The receptionist typed slowly, then frowned. "I'm sorry, sir. Records from that far back are archived. You'd need to speak to our historical records department, down the hall, door on the left." He thanked her, though the words barely left his mouth. The walk felt endless. Inside the records room, an older woman with silver hair and calm eyes greeted him. "How can I help you?" He placed the hospital bracelet and the photograph on her desk. Her expression softened. "Oh," she murmured, "this is very old, very delicate." "I need to know who he was," Elias whispered, "and why he was taken." The woman adjusted her glasses and disappeared behind towering shelves filled with boxes, folders, and decades of forgotten stories. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, she returned with a thin folder, no more than 3 pages thick. "This is all we have," she said. Elias opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were a birth report, a temporary guardianship notice, and a single handwritten note from a social worker. His breath caught. The birth report confirmed it. Samuel Marlowe, born May 12th. Mother, Evelyn Marlowe. Father, unknown. Next, the guardianship notice. Infant placed under temporary custody pending maternal evaluation. Maternal evaluation. Elias felt anger rising. His mother had struggled, yes. She had worked double shifts, lived in a cramped apartment, skipped meals so he could eat. But she was never unfit, never cruel, never careless. Evelyn Marlowe had been love carved into human form. Why would they take her child? He turned to the last page, the note from the social worker. The handwriting was rushed, almost frantic. Mother distressed but cooperative. Repeatedly insisted the child must stay with her. Claimed father may seek to take infant unlawfully. Police notified for safety review. Elias froze. His mother didn't lose her baby. She didn't give him away. She was protecting him from the child's father. His heartbeat thudded painfully. Who was he? What danger had he posed? Why had Evelyn never told him? As he stood there staring at the papers, the silver-haired woman spoke gently. There's a note here, at the bottom. Elias blinked. He hadn't noticed it. Very faint, almost erased. If something happens to me, find him. They must grow up together. The room spun. His knees nearly buckled. His mother hadn't hidden Samuel from him. She had trusted that one day, when the time was safe, he would find him. But something had happened. Something that snatched her chance away. He closed the folder, thanked the woman, and stepped out of the hospital. The cold air slapped his face, but it grounded him. He needed answers she couldn't give. There was only one person left. The last person who had known Evelyn before she vanished. Mrs. Harding, the neighbor from his childhood. He found her in the same old brick building, sitting in a rocking chair on her small balcony. She looked older, frailer, but her eyes still carried the sharpness of someone who observed more than she ever said. When she saw him, she frowned. "Elias, you look like you've seen a ghost." "I found something," he whispered, handing her the photograph. Her breath caught. "Oh dear, Evelyn." "Mrs. Harding," Elias said, fighting to steady his voice. "Who is he? Who is Samuel?" The old woman looked away, her jaw trembling. "Your mother. She was a good woman, the best I ever knew, but she carried a terrible burden." "What burden?" She hesitated. Then, with a sigh as heavy as a confession, she whispered, "Your father." Elias felt something cold crawl down his spine. "She told me he wasn't a good man," Mrs. Harding continued. "Controlling, violent. He wanted the child raised under his authority, his rules. When Evelyn refused, he said he would take the baby." Elias swallowed hard. "She fled," Mrs. Harding said. "Came back here with you. But before you were born, he found her. There was a fight. I heard screaming. The police came. After that, Samuel was taken for evaluation, and she never saw him again," Elias whispered. Mrs. Harding nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "She tried, Elias. She went to court. She begged. But your father, he had money, influence, connections. Every door shut in her face." Elias felt a sickness settle deep in his stomach. "And then she disappeared," he said. "Why?" Mrs. Harding hesitated again, then whispered, "Because he came back." The world stopped. "Elias," she said softly, "your mother didn't abandon you. She disappeared to protect you. She left so he couldn't take you too." His vision blurred as tears welled. All those years, all that pain, all the unanswered questions. His mother hadn't left him. She had saved him, and Samuel was somewhere out there. A brother stolen by fear, raised by someone else, living a life built on the ashes of Evelyn's heartbreak. Elias wiped his tears roughly. He finally understood. The wooden chest wasn't a mystery. It was a message, a plea, a final echo of a mother's love. Find him. And now, with everything laid bare, Elias knew there was one thing left. He would, even if it took the rest of his life. The afternoon sun was sinking slowly behind the old neighborhood roofs, casting long golden shadows across the cracked pavement where Elias once rode his rusted bicycle as a boy. The world felt softer now, quieter, as if time itself had paused to watch him stand beneath the balcony where his mother used to shake dust from freshly washed bedsheets. The wooden chest sat in his hands, warm from the fading light. He ran his thumb across its worn edges, tracing the tiny scratches and dents left by decades of movement, of hiding, of waiting. Inside, the photograph of Samuel no longer felt like a question, but a promise. A breeze drifted through the alley, carrying the faint scent of laundry soap, old brick and something else. something he hadn't felt since childhood, his mother's presence, not as a memory, but as a quiet reassurance. He closed his eyes as the wind brushed against his cheek like a familiar hand, gentle and guiding. For the first time in years, the silence around him wasn't empty. It was full of echoes, of love, of the things she never had the chance to say. He looked at the horizon. Somewhere beyond those fading rooftops, beyond the streets and cities and years that separated them, Samuel was living a life built on the rubble of a secret meant to protect them both. Elias tightened his grip on the chest. He would find him, and when he did, the story his mother began would finally be complete. As he walked away, the last sliver of sunlight caught the photograph in his hand, illuminating the small face of a baby boy who had never truly been lost, only waiting. And for the first time in decades, Elias Marlowe walked toward a future that finally belonged to him.